Have you ever wanted to leave without telling anyone? Just vanish, no messages, no goodbyes. Just you waking up somewhere that expects nothing from you. Not because you're in crisis, not because you hate the people around you, but because a quiet voice inside you has stopped playing along. You don't know when it started. Maybe it's been building for years, beneath the polite small talk, behind the smiling photos, under every meeting, every plan, every carefully worded message. A subtle awareness that this life isn't actually yours. It looks right, but it doesn't feel right. You wake, you work, you reply. You manage your tone, your timing, your image. Everything polished, everything acceptable. But somewhere between all the effort, you stopped being a person and started becoming a placeholder, a function, a profile, a reliable cog in the emotional machinery of everyone else's expectations. So you start thinking about it, leaving, not in anger, not in chaos, just disappearing. No announcements, no explanation, not even rebellion, just absence, a clean break. You picture yourself packing in silence, not with panic, but with precision. Only the essentials, nothing sentimental. Driving out while the city still sleeps, your phone off, your name still in people's mouths, but already gone from the grid. You imagine waking up in a place where no one knows your history. No one's projecting anything onto you. A small cabin maybe, a coastline, a high ridge, where the air doesn't ask anything of you and your presence means nothing to anyone but yourself. Not a vacation, not a break, a reset. Not to start a new life, but to meet life. Without translation, without filters, without having to be anything other than a body breathing in quiet. And you don't tell anyone. Not because they don't deserve to know, but because you deserve to leave without needing permission. The system you were living wasn't life. It wasn't designed to nourish you. It was designed to keep you predictable, efficient, manageable. It gave you a template and called it freedom. A job with benefits, a phone full of notifications, a social script that rewards politeness, compliance, and strategic self-expression. It looked like success, but it felt like stagnation. You didn't notice it at first because it was gradual, a slow narrowing of what you allowed yourself to want, a quiet adjustment of your tone around certain people, a mental checklist before every text, every sentence, every truth. Not too much, not too raw, not too real, just enough to stay liked. Eventually, you stopped needing anyone to tell you who to be. You had internalized it, automated it. You knew how to smile without meaning it, how to apologize when you weren't sorry, how to agree just enough to keep the peace. You became fluent in social fluency, expert at reading the room, but slowly going blind to yourself. That's the life you left. Not a job, not a city, but a pattern of invisibility, a role you were too good at playing, a performance you didn't even realize had a name. And when you walk away from it, not just physically but mentally, you start to feel the residue, like static still clinging to your body, phantom habits, reflexive self-censorship, the urge to check your phone even though no one's expecting you, the echo of a world that's still trying to measure your worth in metrics you no longer believe in. You begin to understand something. It wasn't just that the world was loud, it's that your entire identity had been shaped around responding to it. And now, in the absence of that noise, you're not just alone. You're free to find out what's left. You leave before the city wakes. You don't wait for a breakdown. You don't wait for some big betrayal. You just leave. No meltdown, no middle finger to the skyline, just the quiet certainty that you've given enough, smiled enough, answered enough questions, fulfilled enough roles. You pack what matters, which turns out to be very little. Clothes, tools, books, nothing sentimental, nothing that drags the noise in with you. The air feels different before dawn, not yet heavy with motion, not yet filled with the grind. You start the car and don't look back. The apartment, the office, the familiar streets, they shrink behind you like a past life, not with regret, but with precision. They served their function. Now they're done. You drive without music, without a destination that needs explaining. North, maybe, toward elevation, or west, toward isolation. Mountains, coast, desert, it doesn't matter. What matters is distance, not the miles, but the silence, not the terrain, but the removal. You stop somewhere high, no towers in view, no reception, just cold air and an honest sky, the kind of place where time slows down without needing to announce it, the kind of quiet that doesn't try to comfort you, it just doesn't care, and that's exactly what you came for. No one here knows who you were. No one is tracking your progress. There are no stories to keep alive, no expectations to fulfill. You're just a man in space, and for the first time in a long time, that's enough. You build a small routine. You clear a space to sleep. You boil water. You write things down, not to be read, just to be real. You move slowly, not because you're lazy, but because there's nothing to rush toward. This isn't a retreat, it's a reset, and it begins not with peace, but with interruption. The slow, steady unraveling of everything that was keeping you numb. The silence doesn't comfort you, it confronts you. At first, it feels clean, simple. The absence of noise is a relief. No phone buzzing, no meetings, no small talk. The world doesn't need anything from you, and that feels like a win. But then the silence stretches, and something in you begins to twitch. It's not boredom, it's withdrawal. You didn't just leave a place, you left a pattern, the constant checking, replying, consuming, adjusting. You left the stream that kept your mind distracted enough to ignore itself. Now, with no one to impress and nothing to perform, you start to hear what's been waiting underneath. Your mind begins to stir, memories rise. Questions you never had time to ask start forming sentences. You notice things you've spent years avoiding, how often your thoughts orbit other people, how much of your energy was spent imagining how you were perceived, how little time you've actually spent with yourself without escaping. This isn't a peaceful moment, it's a purge, an unfiltered look at the state of your interior life. You see what you've allowed to shape you, what you've chased, what you've buried. You start to feel your instincts again, not the reactive ones, but the ones that whisper beneath your persona. What you actually like, what actually matters, what you've ignored for so long it stopped bothering to ask. You begin to realize how much of your time was reaction, not creation, how your attention was always dictated by something outside you, and now that there's nothing pulling at it, you have to relearn how to sit, how to breathe, how to just be a person who isn't performing, producing, or proving anything. The silence doesn't affirm you, it doesn't praise you, it doesn't give you answers, it just refuses to lie to you. And that might be the most honest space you've ever stood in. You start to build without needing to announce it. You don't post about your routine, you don't name it monk mode. You just live it, because this isn't for anyone else. There's no one here to impress, no audience to clap, no mirror to check. The approval economy has been shut down, and without it, you start to discover what action looks like when it isn't part of your identity performance. You wake early, you move your body, you train, not for aesthetics, not for a number, but because effort sharpens you. The ache is clean, the repetition is quiet. The day doesn't ask what you accomplished, it just asks if you showed up. You eat what you prepare. You read slowly. You write things you don't intend to share. You sit in long stretches of nothing, and in that stillness, your thoughts begin to simplify. Discipline becomes less about achievement, more about rhythm, a pulse, a structure you can lean against when your emotions drift. You stop chasing highs, you stop diagnosing lows, you stop needing to feel amazing to do what needs to be done. And that's the shift. Your actions stop being reactive. Your life stops being content. You stop checking in with the imaginary audience in your head. The one that used to ask, does this look good? Do I sound strong? Will they understand? You begin to move like no one's watching, because no one is. You carry water, you sweep your space, you maintain the fire, not because it's inspiring, but because it's required. You build not for the dopamine hit, but for the stability, not for praise, but for alignment. This is the part no one romanticizes, the long, quiet labor, the solitude that's no longer aesthetic, the repetition that doesn't pay off in a photo, a post, or a moment of external validation. You're not becoming someone else. You're just finally learning how to live without needing to be seen. You realize most of what you cared about didn't matter, not in the way you thought it did. You thought you needed to be included, to be liked, to be seen as someone who was doing things right. You thought you needed momentum, relevance, recognition, some visible sign that you were becoming something admirable. But out here, with no one watching, those priorities start to collapse under their own weight. You remember how many of your choices were made just to avoid conflict, how often you said yes just to avoid explaining a no, how many hours you spent managing the perception of others, all while slowly disappearing from your own life. You sit with that, not as guilt, but as inventory. You start sorting through what's real: food, breath, sleep, movement, silence. That's what's real. Not as a lifestyle, not as an aesthetic, but as a foundation. Everything else, every post, every calendar, every chase, it starts to feel like static. You remember being so busy that you'd measure rest by how productive it made you. You remember conversation that sounded meaningful but left nothing behind. That's what happens in distance. The signal comes through. You don't get answers. You get reduction. Layers fall away. The list of what matters gets short. And once it's short, it gets clear. You stop craving connection. You start craving honesty. You stop needing entertainment. You start needing stillness. You realize how loud the world was. Not in volume, but in urgency. Everything needing a response. Everything asking you to speed up, to react, to explain. But now there's nothing left to respond to. And in that quiet, you understand something simple. Life isn't asking you to be interesting. It's asking you to be true. Not to an idea, not to a brand, just to what's in front of you, what you can touch, what you can carry, what you can build with your own two hands. The world tries to call you back. The texts stack up. A few people start to ask if you're okay. Most don't. A couple tell you they miss you, but they don't say what they miss. Just the version of you that fit. You read the messages slowly, not out of caution, but because they no longer carry urgency. You don't feel the need to reply immediately, or at all. You don't feel the pull. The tether has been cut. What they really want is for you to return to form, to slip back into the rhythm they recognize, to be reachable, explainable, consistent in the way that made them comfortable. But you've changed frequencies. You're not broadcasting anymore. You step outside. The light hits different. The air isn't cleaner, it's just not curated. There's no algorithm filtering your experience. You're living in uncompressed reality now, and that makes the old messages feel pixelated. You're not angry, you're not avoiding anyone. You just see things as they are now. The endless threads, the empty pleasantries, the urgent nothings. You see how much energy was spent answering things that didn't need to be asked. How much of your time was spent filling space instead of being in it. So you don't rush to come back. You don't prepare a story. You don't draft a caption. You don't plan your re-entry, because you're not coming back to be seen. You're not coming back to resume a role. If you return at all, it won't be to reintegrate. It will be to move through quietly, cleanly, without explanation. You used to fear being misunderstood. Now you don't even need to be known. That's the difference. The man you were before needed confirmation. The man standing here just needs air, food, stillness, and his own damn time. You come back, but not to join them. You walk into places you used to frequent, the same streets, the same voices, the same tempo, but you're no longer part of it. You hear the noise, but it doesn't enter you. You see the urgency on their faces, in their pace, in the way they fill every silence with distraction. But none of it moves you. It's not arrogance, it's not detachment, it's just clarity. You're not against the world, you're just done being pulled by it. No one throws a welcome party, no one celebrates your return, because they don't know you left. Not really. To them, you just took time off, went quiet for a bit, maybe unplugged. What they don't realize is that you never intended to come back the same. And you didn't. You speak less. When you do, you don't rush. You don't soften your words to make them easier to digest. You don't apologize for what you see. You don't explain what you've been doing because most wouldn't understand it anyway. And that no longer bothers you. You don't give advice. You don't try to change anyone. You've learned how much of that is just ego in a helpful mask. You lead by presence now, and your presence says what your words never could. I'm not playing the same game anymore. You move through the crowd like water through a sieve, not resisting, not attaching, just passing through. People say you seem different, calmer, heavier, not tired but settled. They can't name it. They don't need to. You don't need them to, because you didn't come back to be seen. You came back to stay intact. You don't announce your return. You don't reclaim your old seat. You just walk through the world on your own terms now, light on your feet, quiet in your posture, and nothing in your eyes asking for permission. You didn't find peace. You built a life that doesn't need escaping. There's no finish line, no cinematic breakthrough, no final lesson that wraps everything up in language. What you find isn't some transcendent calm. It's not a revelation. It's not bliss. It's something smaller, closer, something that fits in your hands. You wake up and don't dread the day. You move without checking. You make choices that don't need to be justified. You prepare food. You stretch. You sit in silence. You stop measuring your worth in output or affirmation. You stop trying to prove you're alive by how fast you're moving. That's it. That's the life. Not extraordinary, not optimized, not inspirational, just yours. It doesn't need to be branded or explained. It doesn't need to be admired. You're not running anymore. Not from expectations, not from yourself. You've slowed down enough to see clearly, to choose deliberately, to move when it's time. Not because the world yanked your collar, but because something inside you said, now. You don't fantasize about disappearing anymore. Not because the fantasy was wrong, but because it served its purpose. It showed you what was missing. And now you've built a life that doesn't require escape routes. You carry the distance inside you, not as detachment, but as discipline. Not as coldness, but as clarity. You still hear the noise, you just don't let it set the rhythm. You still walk among others. You just no longer need to be among them to feel real. And when people ask where you've been, you just nod, because the answer is too simple to be satisfying. You left, you listened, you built, and now you're here. Not to be noticed, but because there's nowhere else you'd rather be.